Our university is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and we're doing it, I think, in a way that's particularly stimulating for all of us, and that is to have a series of interesting and provocative lectures about some of the great challenges and issues, moral and ethical issues that we face today in the world. We have three themes in this self-inquiry or exploration that we're doing as a university. One is, of course, the relationship between the university and society. I mean, what are the obligations and aspects of the outside greater world that bear in upon the university? And we've had several talks on that subject. And then we also are looking at the relationship between natural science and hard science and humanities and social science, which is an extremely important subject for us. We are a university of primarily social sciences and humanities, but we also have some crossing of bridges with cognitive science and now network science, which is going to be appearing here. So that's an important theme. And then a third theme is this great tidal wave of information that we all face in our lives, either as scholars or as simply as human beings, as we deal with the internet and all of the aspects of information technology, which bring much more information to us than we can absorb. How do we address all these issues? So I just say that as a kind of brief introduction to put in perspective the wonderful lecture that we're going to be having today, which I think asks both some humorous and some provocative questions. I understand there's a secret to the formula that's right here sitting on the table, which I suppose if all of you listen very carefully, maybe you'll be treated to one of those particular pills. I thought perhaps coming to the table that these were something that we call in the US jelly beans. And of course, jelly beans could have a counteractive effect on living to 128. So I'm told no, as you'll hear, these in fact are the secrets. As you know, the great explorer Ponce de Leon, who went to Florida in the 17th century and got lost in the jungles of Florida, suddenly came across what he regarded was the pool of life. If you jumped into it, you would actually live forever. And the humorous aspect of Ponce de Leon is his legacy of there are all these retired people who now go to Florida and think that they're following in his footsteps and will indeed live forever. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Inez de Beaufort, and I am going to leave the full introduction to Judith Chandor, who is, of course, the director of our C-Lab, a very important center for the study of the relationship between bioethics and science. So thank you very much, and please join me in welcoming Professor de Beaufort to CEU.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, Professor Inez de Beaufort, Mr. Rector, colleagues, students and guests, on the occasions of the 20th anniversary of the Central European University, the Center for Ethics and Law in Biomedicine, CELAB, wishes to contribute to the celebration of our institution by organizing bioethics lecture series with distinguished speakers. The lecture series focuses on ethical, legal, and social challenges of new scientific advances in the field of biomedicine. The enhancement of bodily capacities, the extension of lifespan, the commercialization of the human body are the core of the ethical debates that engage a large range of disciplines outside of life sciences, from philosophy to anthropology, from ethics to law, from gender studies to public health, among others. Today, we shall discuss the ethical implications of introducing medical treatments that aim to extend human lifespan and to prolong youth. Many of ancestors hardly reach the age of 60. but they already lived much longer than preceding generations. Through the first half of the 20th century, improved nutrition and the control of infectious diseases drastically reduced child and infant mortality. Then, in the middle of 20th century, antibiotics, for instance, penicillin, later immunosuppressive medication, development of transplantations, all yielded substantial decrease in mortality. Continued improvement in living standards, health behavior, and medical care also lowered mortality from chronic diseases, especially such as heart disease and stroke. Today, a significant portion of North American, Western European, and Far Eastern population reach 90 or even 100 years of age. After all these massive changes, within a historically very short period of time, have finally reached the maximum capacity of human lifespan. And if we are intended, or indeed close to some theoretical age limit, then what should we do with this knowledge? Should we worry about it or celebrate the prospect of longer life for more and more people? What should we do about the consequences of unequal access to the latest technologies of this type of human enhancement? Or, on a more philosophical tone, should we really extend biological life in old bodies with souls that are getting old? In the age of self-promotion and celebration of outward beauty, appearance accounts for a larger share in personal social capital among women than men. The anti-aging medical and cosmetic industry claims that aging is not inevitable. What they mean by aging is, of course, biological aging, but the reproduction of social inequalities in societies, including sexism and ageism, cannot be treated by mere biological, biotechnological, or cosmetic enhancement. True cognitive enhancement is also in the pipeline of new upcoming biotechnological inventions, but anti-wrinkle products, hormone replacement therapy, cosmetic surgery, Viagra, gender-specific anti-aging treatments have been already used for a long time. We can witness two parallel tendencies. Aging has become medically treatable condition, and signs of aging has no longer just a beauty concern, it has become a condition that calls for medical treatment. More people reaching 90 or 100 years of age, I think it's a welcome phenomenon, but it has also alarming consequences in rapidly aging societies with decreasing populations. As pension crises are looming in much of the so-called developed countries, more and more people are compelled to stay fit and energetic in order to be able to work full-time even in their 60s and 70s. Thus, anti-aging treatments or masking biological age often becomes essential for the social survival because old people often become vulnerable in the society. They may lose their autonomy and authority. They may become dependent on the state, on pensions and healthcare services. A lecturer today will speak about the social and ethical implications of extending the human lifespan in a presentation with the title, Will You Still Love Me When I'm 128? The topic calls for the question on the ethical problems we will face in a case of lifespan extension. Should everyone have access to life-prolonging treatment? Is there a fair minimum of years to live? How would we deal with the views on the good life? Will we be bored? Will we have different personal careers? And how we will look? What rejuvenating enhancements or appearances would we want? A speaker for today is Professor Inez de Beaufort, is a professor of healthcare ethics and head of the Department of Medical Ethics and Philosophy of Medicine at the Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam. She has published on different subjects in medical ethics, human research, reproductive technologies, personal responsibilities for health and the elderly, and several public health issues. She has been a member of many ethics committees and boards of hospitals and national and international organizations. She was one of the members of the European Group on Ethics in Science and New Technologies, and an honorary member of the Dutch Health Council and a member of the Dutch National Committee for Ethics and Medical Research. On a personal note, I had an opportunity to work together with Inez in numerous projects and sat together on various boards, and I also had a chance to listen to her at different conferences. But this is the first time that she gives a lecture at the CEU, so please welcome her warmly. Inez, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. It's an honor to be invited here. It's only my second visit to Budapest, and I must say that because I wanted to go here, I accepted the kind invitation of Judith. That was the other reason I accepted that. It's very hard to say no to Judith. If you are bored, will you start waving your hands? If I talk too fast, will you start waving your hands? I can predict now that something will go wrong with the technology. Every time I touch a machine, it goes berserk. As you grow old, you lose your interest in sex. Your friends drift away. Your children often ignore you. There are many other advantages, of course, but these seem to be the outstanding ones. What does aging have in store for our appearance? Baldness, wrinkles, blubbery arms, potbellies, drooping eyelids, facial hair for women, and it's worse if you're not used to it. Gray hair, varicose veins, breasts for men, and it's worse if you're not used to it. Sagging breasts for women, erection problems, and the female equivalent. Bottoms that have lost most of their past allure. Dentures. Some of these will inevitably hit us all if we age, even if we or others deny it. What does aging have in store for our character? Forgetfulness, uselessness, being discarded as an old fool, a cantankerous remnant from days gone by, a stubborn relic, a person who is tolerated because he is still there, but who will not be missed anymore if he would not be there. Dependency, diapers, broken hips, wheelchairs. Some of these will inevitably hit us all if we age. In our society, as Judith has already emphasized, with its huge emphasis on beauty, the attraction, the charm, and the energy of youth, aging is not easy. Being old is not easy. To quote one of your famous authors, Sandor Marai, we age slowly. First, our pleasure in life and other people declines. Everything gradually becomes so real. We understand the significance of everything. Everything repeats itself in a kind of troubling boredom. It's the function of age. A man, poor creature, is only immortal no matter what he does. Then our bodies age, not all at once. First it is the eyes, or the legs, or the heart. We age by installments. And then suddenly our spirits begin to age. The body may have grown old, but our souls still yearn and remember and search and celebrate and long for joy. And when the longing for joy disappears, all that are left are memories of vanity. And finally, we are truly old. One day we wake up and rub our eyes and do not know why we have woken. Living younger, rejuvenating, and even striving for immortality are familiar themes for humanity. This is a very famous painting of the Fountain of Youth. We fear aging, we fear death, and we cherish life. But so far, death has been inevitable. In fiction, to get immortality, you only have to sell your soul to the devil. I highly recommend you do not sell your soul to the devil. The results usually leave much to be desired, as we know from fictional stories such as Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray and Goethe's Faust. One loses one's friends and loved ones, one is incredibly bored. And on top of all that, there is always the problem of the demands of the devil who keeps coming back, as he still wants more and more. If one settles for less than immortality, a lot is offered. There is Cantasium glucosamine, Cantasium ginkgo biloba, Maxi Muscle, Maxi Detox, Griffonio bean extract, and a lot more as a simple search on the internet will learn. Feeling younger, anti-aging, and looking younger is a huge industry and involves lots and lots of money. Stop the clock. Whether wise beyond our years or big kids, we all want to stay young. Scientific breakthroughs have brought some amazing supplements to us. I now will show you a small part of a film called Death Becomes Her, where Meryl Streep goes for rejuvenating elixir.
Bottoms up.
Now a warning. Now a warning? Take care of yourself. You and your body are going to be together a long time. Be good to it. Sempre viva. Live forever.
It's very interesting to see the rest of the movie. It doesn't end too well, as you may imagine. As Judith has already mentioned, 100 years ago, human life expectancy was around 60, and it is now 80 to 85. For an important part because of eradicating diseases that killed the young, but not only. We still grow older already, on the average, 3 years every 10 years. Opinion is divided on how old in theory we could become. I will now, it's maybe a bit difficult to understand, show you a part of an interview of Aubrey de Grey, who is a researcher in the UK and intend to live even more than 128 years.
My name is Aubrey de Grey. I'm the Chairman and Chief Science Officer of the Methuselah Foundation, which is a US registered charity that seeks to defeat the aging process and keep us biologically young indefinitely. And this is my contribution to Scenario Land. In 2020, I think that I can hope anyway, that we're going to have reached a situation where everybody knows that we are going to defeat aging in humans, even though we won't probably have done it actually by that time. We will know that we're going to because of results in the laboratory, essentially extending by a great deal the longevity, the healthy longevity of mice that have only received treatment starting in middle age.
This is a huge movement. I don't know if you have heard of it, but it's very interesting to look this up on the internet. So some say that 120 is about the maximum, and others argue that we might even become a lot older. It also depends on the methods that we would use to increase our lifespan. If we eradicate diseases, we will not die of those diseases, but there may always be accidents. If we can unravel and influence the aging process itself, continuous renewal and regeneration might be possible. Whether aging is a disease depends on the definition of disease, of course, but may be supported by the disease called progeria, which leads to aging at a very young age, premature aging. These are children suffering from progeria. There are very different theories on how to slow down aging and increase our lifespan, for example, by lifestyle, genetic manipulation, and caloric restriction. mice and some sort of flies can live double or even more of their lifespan if they have a very restricted caloric intake. It's very important to realize that there are two layers in the debate. One is life extension, living younger, adding life to years. The other is slowing down the aging process itself, anti-aging or age retardation, which is called adding life to years. For example, to have 85 vigorous and healthy years. It concerns different purposes. Some arguments against life extension do not hold for anti-aging without life extension. But to a certain extent, this is theoretical, as the two are intertwined, as anti-aging will in all likelihood lead to a life extension. Prolonging life without anti-aging is not an attractive perspective. I don't know if you have heard of the book by Nobel Prize winner Sarah Mungo, where death stops coming. So people will stay in very ill situations for a long time. So whether life extension is attractive depends very much on our physical and mental situation. One probably does not want to live 50 years more with the condition of a frail 90-year-old person in a state of forgetfulness, deaf, crippled by arthritis, and in pain. We want life extension if we can take care of ourselves, do things, move, travel, walk, enjoy relationship, activities, whatever goals we want to pursue. The prospect is definitely not to be a frail elderly person, but a vigorous old person. The attraction of the added years is to spend them in relatively good health. We do want to live longer, but we do not want to be old longer. And even if we would not live longer, anti-aging is still a very attractive option. Now, suppose that I have developed this pill. Here they are. And these pills will rejuvenate you. You only need to take one a day, and then you will live 25 years longer. And it also has a strong retardation of aging effect. Had I actually developed such a pill, however much I enjoy Budapest, I would not be here. I would be very rich and have a holiday on a tropical island, surrounded by nice young men who bring me pink cocktails. Would you, if I offered you the pill, would you take it? Of course, it has no side effects. Hypothetical pills never have side effects. Or would you say, no, thank you, I do not want to live 25 years longer? And why would you say that? What arguments would you consider? I will try to frame the moral questions that you would ask yourself. So the first question is, do I really want it, or am I influenced by society's expectations? It is important to think, and Judith has already mentioned this, about the way we look at old age and old people. In our Western societies, according to some, we are forced by societal expectations to try to rejuvenate. The pressure to be and look young and stop the aging process, or if we cannot stop it, use all kinds of camouflage devices, is very strong. This is a very famous film called Brazil. It has nothing to do with autonomous choices, with states we want and desire, with our own ideas on how we want to live. It's Western culture with its merciless pace and idolizing of youth that makes aging so difficult. We have arranged our ghettos for the elderly. We think it's decent to take care of them, but often they are lonely and find themselves in the margins of society. The elderly feel ugly and superfluous. And this view is sometimes supported with very romantic pictures of the social respect for the elderly in other societies, for example, Africa. So if we take this hypothetical pill, we just succumb to societal pressures. It is not bad, but it is sad. It's not the aging and the elderly who actually want the rejuvenating enhancement. It is the social circumstances that create this want. And professionals and quacks, of course, jump on the market. Were we to live in a society that respected elderly and treated them well, and not as this logistic nuisance, then we would not even want to change our aging. We would carry our mature ripeness with pride and feel good in our aging bodies and enjoy the attention of the young who want to profit from our vast experience and great wisdom. I wish my children would hear this. How to judge this argument? I think there's certainly some force in the argument. Already when one reaches the age of 30, one is made aware of wrinkles and lost options and last options. And from that day on, things will go irrevocably downhill. But even if the prejudices about old age would change, I think we would still want life extension and anti-aging. I would like to be at least 128. I would like to have more years in good health, to read more books, enjoy more friends, really have the time to visit Budapest, have more chances, and live more. The second question you would have to raise: would I postpone everything? And this is called the horizon issue. At my age, one is painfully aware of all the possible lives and experiences you cannot have anymore. So this is the perspective. What would it mean for the young if they knew that they had a lot more years to live? The President's Commission of the United States, in its report Beyond Therapy, has formulated this issue as follows. Many of our greatest accomplishments are pushed along, if only subtly and implicitly, by the spur of our finitude and the sense of having only a limited time. A far more distant horizon, a sense of essentially limitless time, might leave us less inclined to act with urgency. Now, very poetically, they say, the remoteness of the midnight hour might influence negatively how we spend our days. So they have quite a gloomy view, I think, on the lengthening of life. But would an extended lifespan lead to continuous postponing of things because you think you can do it later anyway? No hurry, no pressure? Would we indeed become lazy? Would you accept things in your life that you would not accept if your life was shorter? Would we lose the capacity of a carpe diem attitude towards life, enjoying its intensity? I think the President's Commission is a bit too gloomy. Even if we would, on the average, live longer, there is still always the threat of death. We are not immortal. One might still be struck by lightning or hit by a bus. It's less likely, but it's always there. We still would have limited time, as we will not live indefinitely. So there is always a rush and a certain pressure. So I'm not convinced that the perspective of living longer would take away the incentive to accomplish things. On the contrary, one might want to do more things and have more experiences, more zest for life, curiosity, and eagerness to live. I, for one, find one of the most difficult aspects of aging that you realize that some experiences will not be possible, that there are no second chances. A longer life would strengthen my hope and dreams and therefore fuel the old lady. I would maybe postpone some things because I have a serious opportunity to postpone things. Rather than lazy postponing, it would be realistic postponing. The third question you should ask yourself is, would I be bored? The problem of boredom. This is related to the previous issue. What would we do? Would you in fact still love me when I'm 128? Or would you think, not her again, she is really past the expiring date? Can we stay married to the same person for, say, 75 or 100 years? Till death do us part may be very, very long. 60 years seems to be already quite an accomplishment. Do I really want to celebrate my 70th anniversary as a professor of medical ethics? Or will there be more and more seen it all, done it all moments? How well are we able to fill our lives and enjoy life? The British philosopher John Harris, in his book Enhancing Evolution, has argued that those who think they will be bored should not strive for longevity or indefinite life, as they are simply not good candidates. I quote him now, suffice it to say that only the terminally boring are in danger of being terminally bored, and perhaps they do not deserve indefinite life. Those who are bored can, thanks to their vulnerability, opt out at any time. But those of us who do not have terminal failure of imagination should be left to create new ways of enjoying life and doing good. End quote. I'm not so sure that people can so easily be divided in terminally boring and the rest of us. I'm sure that you all do not belong to that group. I would not worry about boredom for most of us if life extension is, say, about 30 years. But what if it were 100 years or more, or 150? Would you still love me if I'm 250? And even for those who are not likely to get bored, it would definitely mean that we would have to rethink families and marriages. How many next generations do you want to know? Of course, your grandchildren, but actually their children and the children of your grandchildren's children. We would also have to rethink hobbies and professional careers. We would have to work longer. Probably we should have to have different careers and not one job for your whole life. Of course, those who really enjoy their work would not stop. Like Picasso, who worked till his 90s, Pablo Casals. In order not to become bored, we would also need new social structures, and this is Question 4. Would I linger in the wrong chapter of the narrative of my life? And this is on seasons and the cycle of life. The slightly gloomy American President's Commission emphasizes this cycle of life argument. Strange as it may seem, from the perspective of personal experience, aging defines youth as much as it does old age, because each stage in our life is defined relative to the others and the whole of life. Age retardation would therefore affect not only our later years, but all of our years, in both immediate and mediated ways. They call it quite poetically the view on life as a symphony. Life as lived in time may be more akin to a symphony in which a certain temporal order governs the relationship between the parts and the whole, and more important, gives a dynamic process its directed character. Now, 2 remarks. Just does changing the seasons in the cycle mean that the cycle itself loses its meaning? I do not think so. Suppose my daughter is getting married, or at least agrees to be with a man for the next 25 years. If I look as young as she does, that would be odd and uncomfortable. One wants to be aware of the generation gap. There is a mother and a daughter and a grandmother. I don't want to look like a teenager, though I would like to have the energy of the teenager, but I would like to look younger than I do now. So the cycle of life is important, but making some stages in that cycle last longer seems to be quite possible without losing the notion of a cycle. Here you have the cycle at its worst. And I don't see why the final part of the symphony should last very long. The duration of the stages of the cycle, or the chapters of the story, if that's the metaphor you prefer, may change. Actually, this is something we already do, as in no way I look like my grandmother when she was as old as I am now. We want to age, but not that much. The fifth question is, am I going against nature? Is it wrong to rejuvenate yourself and take this pill because it's normal or natural to age and to die? And therefore we should not try to exceed our natural or normal lifespan? The first question, of course, is what is normal and what is natural? The increase in lifespan over the past century obviously is a fact, and that implies that what is natural or normal has changed significantly. What is normal now was not normal a century ago. What is the moral significance of a development being normal or natural? Does that make it morally good? This often seems to be the underlying presupposition, but it's highly questionable. It's normal in many countries now to be overweight or even fat. Is it therefore good? No. Prostate cancer is quite normal in elderly men. Is that good? No. Forgetfulness and dementia are normal, but surely that's not an argument against developing treatments against Alzheimer's. Again, John Harris has dealt with this argument, arguing that many things are normal and that we still don't want them. The normality of a trait is clearly doing no work at all in the assessment of its moral acceptability or of the risks it might be worth running to change things. If we subtract the acceptability from the normality, we are left with nothing of moral nor of argumentative force. But, one could argue, I use natural means. And I will talk a bit about natural means and natural goals. The argument of nature may refer to the goal itself. Life extension or anti-aging is unnatural. It might also refer to the means used. Sometimes it's argued that if a goal is achieved by natural means, then it's morally okay. But if it's achieved by unnatural means, then it's not right. If I, through a very healthy lifestyle and a diet close to starvation, no smoking, good exercise, and what have you for horrible things, extend my life expectancy, then that is natural and therefore morally right. If, on the other hand, I have artificial organs or operation or genetic treatments, then it's morally doubtful. This distinction is often made when it comes to beauty and anti-aging. Plastic surgery is unnatural. Well, it is a bit unnatural. But someone who lives healthily and therefore looks younger, then it's morally okay. The argument presupposes that it's always possible to distinguish between the naturalness of the goal and of the means. And in some cases this might be possible, but not always. But even if the means and the goals can be distinguished, then one can still ask, why not have the pill? Why not use unnatural means if they work? Behind this lies a certain normative view on nature, that natural is good, or the idea that the non-natural way does not require any efforts, just pop the pill, whereas for the natural way you have to work hard. Such a Calvinistic view might lie behind the distinction. What also lies behind this argument is the acceptance imperative. One should accept growing old and decay and death as a natural process. But the acceptance imperative has definitely a certain appeal, and we all recognize there is a certain sadness, maybe even tragedy, in those people who are trying too hard to escape from aging and who deny the cycle of life and do not succeed. This is poor Donatella Versace after her facelift. It is sad if people try to look younger and fail miserably. It may even demonstrate some sort of self-loathing. And they do indeed seem to linger in the wrong chapter of their life. But suppose that she was to succeed in looking younger, would it not be different then? Is it the failure of the attempt that saddens us rather than the attempt itself? Who, after all, says when you have to leave a chapter or a season and move to the following one? Should we conform to the expectations about behavior in certain stages? The do and don'ts with regard to the elderly are very strong. They are supposed to behave. They are to be polite and demure and wait for their turns. They do not fall in love, and of course they do not have sex. There is a Belgian and Dutch television program called Benidorm Bastards, which makes fun of all the expectations regarding the elderly by confronting young people with totally unexpected behavior of old people. The acceptance imperative is very popular when it comes to new technologies. It was also brought forward when opponents of reproductive technology said to infertile couples that they should accept their infertility, or worse, and adding insult to injury if you ask me, described how wonderful life can be without children. Would we accept the argument when it comes to Viagra? Being old leads to being impotent, accept it. Or even worse, tell men how nice life can be when you're impotent? I suffer from an allergy with regard to the acceptance imperative. I think it has been misused too often in the history of mankind, and I do not think that it will solve any moral qualms we may have regarding rejuvenating treatments. The sixth question is, will I be in someone's son? Societies, families, communities, they are built in a way on doing your thing, work, reproduce, care, and then being succeeded by someone else. Life extension would endanger or even destroy the balances of this system of coming and going of individuals and generations. There are different interpretations of this argument. The first is that there are already too many people. Too many people on this planet, and we should definitely not add to that problem by staying along a lot longer. Overpopulation, of course, is a very serious problem, and it has been argued that also that people might have fewer children if they lived longer. The American President's Commission states, the evidence of past centuries suggests that increased lifespans tend to be accompanied by decreased birth rates. Will vastly longer lives mean fewer children? And how might such societies function? I have wondered whether an opposite effect might occur, that people would have more successive families and therefore have more children. Like middle-aged men now sometimes do, they would have a second nest or even a third. Another complicated question is, will it actually be me? The person who is 120 is obviously not the same person as the one who is 40. Different persons, so it has been argued, will be inhabiting the same body. Who is actually benefiting of life extension? Of course, you are not the same as you were when you were 10 years old. But even though many things have happened to us, you will still think of yourself as the one who was born in the year that you were born and who experienced this and that over his or her life. Some argue that if you live very, very long, this will change and that you will not remember the one you were 100 years ago. Is that so? Is that so that people who are now, say, 100, do they experience this discontinuity? I have my doubts about it. But suppose they do, then this is a serious problem. Because the idea of longevity is that you live longer, that you have the experiences and remember the memories. It's your story and not somebody else's. Not the separate stories of A and B and C who have all inhabited your body, like different guests in a hotel room. The whole point of longevity is that it is you. Harris has cleverly argued against this argument in defense of immortality, saying that if there are indeed different persons, A, B, and C in one body, it suffices if B remembers being A and C remembers being B. And then he argues, and this is absolutely hilarious, multiplication of selves in the same body is so ecologically sound, environmentally friendly, and population efficient that it might well become the preferred method of procreation for all except the most unregenerated eco-wastrels or sex-obsessed chauvinists. Now, it's a very clever and very funny argument. He is the master of turning things upside down, but I'm not sure I find it satisfying. This recycling of bodies for new persons to inhabit may indeed solve the population problem, but it's absolutely not the point of longevity, which is that you would live longer. Another version of the argument focuses not on too many people, but on too many old people. And already, and this has already been mentioned also by Judith, is that there are lots of debates on our aging societies and the problems this will cause for people who will have to pay for the pensions of the baby boomers and work to keep the economy going. It definitely requires us to think what we would want to do with the demographic structure of society. It is argued that old people are a burden with regard to care, money, and blocking the paths and chances of future generations. They need care, and suppose that you would have to take care of your ailing parents for, say, 45 or 50 years or even longer. That is a lot to ask. Now, the whole idea of life extension is that it's also an extension in good health and vitality, so that the old will be young and they will take care of themselves. The other argument is that they will be blocking the way. The vigorous old will need to earn money and live their lives, and so they will block the way of generations after them. This is also being argued for by the President's Commission. They say the succession of generation would be obstructed by a glut of the able. The old might think less of preparing their replacements, and the young could see before them only layers of elderly blocking the path, and not great reason to hurry in building families or careers, remaining functionally immature young adults for decades. This again has to do with the notion of the cycle of life and renewal. Answers might lie in starting new companies or undertakings and finding new niches rather than wait for the old ones to leave. But that may only hold for the extremely talented, while the ordinary rest of us, at a certain moment, in fact, are at the end of our creativity and out of fresh new ideas. I'm quite optimistic. I hope that if we are not innovative in a certain role, say an ethics professor, that one might be creative in a different role, say a jewelry designer. And I hope that there is a stock of mental plasticity and new elan that can be used. If not, it would probably mean that we have to have obligatory expiring dates. Another problem is that some jobs may not demand much creativity, but are very demanding and not very rewarding. Imagine having to be a garbage cleaner or a person between the teller in the supermarket for 80 years. That is not an attractive perspective. So this will definitely require a new balance between work and leisure time. Can we afford that? At some point in time, we may even have to decide that the old should leave, as they are a barrier for the young. Harris speaks of generational cleansing. I quote him, "If the generational turnover proved too slow for regeneration of youth and ideas, we might face a future in which the fairest and most ethical course might seem to be to contemplate a sort of generational cleansing. This would involve deciding collectively how long it is reasonable for people to live in each generation and trying to ensure that as many possible live healthy lives of that length." He also adds that no non-consensual form of generational cleansing would be defensible, which is quite a relief. But a mandatory stopping or changing may be necessary for the generational turnover. The seventh, and this is the last question because it's hot in here and I can see some of you dozing off, is who has access to this treatment? And this is the problem of parallel populations. Of course, I would give you my hypothetical pill for free, as it is so kind of you to come here and listen. But that is not likely to happen if someone else develops a real pill. Imagine that there are treatments and that they are not equally accessible for all. Some can afford them and some can not. There are parallel populations. Now, we should realize that we already live in a world with parallel populations. Many countries have huge disparities in availability of resources and income. Now, what do you think? The alternative is to give the hypothetical pill to nobody. That has been called the total justice, total catastrophe strategy. And it's not really attractive. And I think that it is not practically feasible because people will always find a way to gain access to legal or illegal means. This is my secretary stealing the pills. What would we do if we think that the differences are really unfair? Should we have a different focus of health and medical research and focus on premature death rather than on longevity? I think this is not realistic, as longevity is something that occurs as prevention and lifestyle and healthier circumstances are created for the young. Longevity is in a way a side effect of controlling and combating diseases. Funding of research into aging leads to very important knowledge of aging, of which also the young can profit. It may make healthcare a lot cheaper as the elderly are more healthy, money that then could be invested in childhood diseases. So such a kind of research priority will not solve the problem. Will it help to distinguish between luxury and essential needs? I think this may work in the field of beauty and aging. A facelift may be a luxury. And so may be many other strategies to camouflage old age. But it's different when it comes to ways to change the functioning of our body. That is not a luxury. It may also work in the area of food. Healthy nutrition is essential, but lobster or your wonderful cakes are not. It's probably more difficult when it comes to treatments that prevent old age diseases. It still, I think, is unfair that some grow very old and others may not reach their fair innings in terms of years. Some have genes that predispose to a very long life, others unfortunately do not. Some run into a bus, others do not. But this is in a way a kind of bad luck situation that is unfair in a cosmic sense, but it's very difficult to say that someone is to blame for the situation. So we could decide on some fair innings, say 128, and then consider all the extra years as a luxury and strive for a fair system so that everybody has a chance of at least reaching the fair innings age. I'm going to skip something now. Of course, our individual lives are very different, and that is the problem with the fair innings argument. that some only find happiness in a very late stage in their lives. Their wish for longevity may be because they so much hope to finally find some happiness. On the other hand, the argument cannot be that everyone has a right or can be guaranteed a certain dose of happiness, and that if you have had your portion, that then you should leave this world. It would be a right that cannot be enforced nor, I think, measured. So what are other approaches to possible unfairness? We could have a lottery and toss coins to decide who gets the pill. Maybe that's the fairest solution. We could design a system of merit. Picasso would have gotten the extra years. But I find that very difficult, because what should the criteria for merit be? And I think that this remains one of the most thorny and most vexing problems we will have to face if and when these treatments are available. So it's good that my pills are only hypothetical pills and that we don't need to solve this now. There is one area in which we as individuals have an influence, and that is our lifestyle. If we live a healthy lifestyle, moderate eating, lots of vegetables and fruits, exercise, moderate alcohol intake, and do not smoke, we can influence the length of our lives significantly. It's very interesting that many, including me, do not do that, although when asked, they would definitely want to live longer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this thought-provoking lecture, and I think we all enjoyed, and I think we are not terminally bored in this audience. And I think that there are many questions which this presentation could raise, and I hope that the audience will raise some questions, but maybe we can start with the point that in the beginning of your presentation you very much focused on life extension from the point of the individual, as if it were a free choice. But I think that many of us feel that there will be some obstacles in the society. We already see some clashes in case, for instance, the pension reforms. That, do you expect that there will be some tensions between the generations, so that it's not entirely the free choice of the individuals whether they would like to live with these possibilities of enhancement? Let's suppose that someone has a capacity to genetically to live longer. Do you think that there will be some, also whether there are some cultural specific conditions that some societies, they face this problem very differently? For instance, the average life expectancy in Central and Eastern Europe, where we come from, is unfortunately is still much, much below than Western Europe. So do you see that there will be some tensions between these generations?
I definitely think there will be such tensions. It very much depends, and that is hard to predict, on how life extension will in fact take place. It might be that some medical treatment is found or discovered, which would mean that it would probably be only available to a few people in the beginning, which would not cause a huge societal problem in that case. And if it goes that way, then there will be time to adapt. Then the point will more be who will have access to the life extension and who will not, rather than take care of the ones who have had the life extension. Because presumably these are also the ones with the money. So they can afford the pension. It's not necessary for the poor younger generations to slave in order to take care of these. So it depends very much on on what scale this will actually take place. But if it's available for many more, then it will require a whole different social structure with new jobs, later pensions. We will have to work longer, and I think we will want to work longer. I mean, you don't want to be a pensioner for 60 or 70 years of your life. That would be probably rather boring. Well, not at this university where they organize lectures all the time, but in an ordinary life.
Do you think that these new enhanced old
parts of the society would require some types of different rights in order to participate fully in the society. Because I think, of course, one issue is the driving license, also whether, the problem with the pension and working longer, as you mentioned, but some people raised these issues of what sorts of rights. Many of us here in the audience came from the legal studies, from which I'm very happy to see them also. They came from different departments, but also from legal studies. Do you think that there will be some problems of assessing the rights?
Well, again, if you and I were, so you were 100 and I was 150, there is an age difference, then, and we would be like this, then I don't think that we would need specific rights. We could drive, we could work, so it's very much depending on the quality of the way our bodies and our brains function. But that's also kind of a precondition for life extension to be interesting. I mean, I don't want to be a demented person for 50 years. So I'm not sure whether you would need extra rights or whether you would just continue the rights you have as a person already.
Because as you said, it could be also recognized as a side effect of the lifelong treatment. I think that there are already some questions. Yes, please, Tama.
Yeah, I think I can manage even without the microphone. I would like to go back to the question of overpopulation. And not to be mistaken, I would very selfishly opt for the pill, of course. However, if we consider the relations that you mentioned, that with the prolongation of life of the population, also the birth rates drop. This was true in developed countries, where also there was other industrial development, and probably this would be the countries where these pills would be most accessible. There, the birth rate wouldn't drop further, very probably. However, this would mean that the developed countries, which are already using up most of the world's resources, would have people that are living longer. Their birth rate wouldn't be dropping further, whereas the underdeveloped countries wouldn't probably have this access. So the population of the world that is using up most of the world's resources would be increasing, whereas the population of the less developed world wouldn't be decreasing at the same time.
That would be unfair. I mean, as unfair as it is now. I mean, that's already very unfair now. Countries where there is, well, overpopulation is probably not even the politically right, but where people have more children. On the other hand, that is very often because children still die, because there are no social systems that guarantee people care at old age. So you might have a decrease, if there would be a juster world, you might have a decrease of the birth rate in those countries, but that still doesn't solve your issue of using up the energy, because there is no guarantee that would be more fair. I have my doubts about a decrease in the birth rate if longevity, because I would definitely, I think, start a second family and have another set of kids with somebody else. And no, I'm not sure that you would be satisfied with one family all your life. So it might turn out worse than your scenario, in that we might have more children and even use more energy.
There's a question. There is a microphone. Maybe it's better to use the microphone.
Thank you again for the lecture. I think you raised lots of questions which can become very relevant in political terms. And you already gave some hints to those dimensions which would translate in political terms, like, I don't know, the unequal access to financial sources to have treatment services, health services, and so on. And in some of your slides, I mean, probably majority of your slides, there were images, lots of images with women. And probably only one or two with a male person, Berlusconi and so on. So I paid attention a lot to those images. And so one dimension would be this gender dimension of your discourse, of your story, of your questioning. And I wasn't sure I got explicit Okay, it was implicit there always, and you raised this question. So, first I would like to ask you, how do you think this gender dimension, you would put it explicitly, in explicit terms, would work in relation to this issue of life extension? And why would be desirable life extension in these gender terms? Because I think it was different there. I mean, Berlusconi case, it's another story. For those women, I mean, I know, Donatella, Versace, different stories. Your movie, your short, it was something else there, of course. And secondly, that given this political framework, you know, like saying in political terms, this unequal power relation in terms of basic access and then higher degrees of inequalities, how should we account for this desirability of life extension?
I realized that I was right in raising the questions. That's because I don't have the answers. The gender issue, I think that on the whole, men as much want to opt for the longevity than women. The fact that, and maybe I created the wrong image, when it comes to beauty and looking younger, there is a huge gender issue, and that's why in the slides you see more women, because a lot more is offered on the market for women. Although this is slowly changing, and even now men are into all these rejuvenating treatments, but it's still a bit less than women. But that holds for the appearance side. I think that when it comes to actually adding years to your life and the vitality, very odd, I have been looking for the sales figures of Viagra and I couldn't find them. But if you look at pills like that, that's a huge market, which obviously also involves men. So I think longevity is as much a male as a female thing. But the vitality and the beauty are more complicated for women. The access problem is, I don't know how to solve it apart from in John Harris's way. If you say that it would not be a solution to give it to nobody, so that you would have to accept for a certain time some inequality, but in the same time strive to have equal access for everybody, that seems to me the only fair solution one can think of. If there are scarce means, then probably a lottery would be the fairest way. It will not go in the way of a lottery. I mean, it will be the rich who have access first. But the lottery is the only really fair way I could think of.
Annika? I was wondering if there are some studies on the public attitudes toward these life extension issues, because this could reveal the gender dimension too, if there are some differences based on gender or age categories in this respect. I've seen a study done in Australia which showed that men are more favorable for this life extension treatment and research, and I was wondering if there are some study in Europe.
I'm afraid I don't know. There must be. But I haven't heard of big ones like Eurobarometer or things. But I don't think it's there, but there must be. I'll look into that. Sorry.
I think Thomas.
Yeah, thank you for that discussion. I'm just thinking about it. It seems to me that if you look at the numbers, the number of people living beyond 85, we're managing to crack through the adding years to life issue. But the problem seems to be adding life to years. And your last slide, I think, is quite apropos. So the ethical issue seems to be, there seem to be almost two different issues going on here. And maybe I don't want to put the great boxes, but it would seem to me that you can slowly see some changes on adding life to years. I mean, people talk about lifelong learning, some of the buzzwords that people use. every once in a while where I come from, there's a story of an older person who goes back and gets a university degree or even a PhD. So the question becomes, I think, where do you see the bigger challenge ethically? Because I think they're different. And adding life to years, to my way of thinking, really gets at this inequity and distributional issue. Much more so than I think adding years to life. I got that right.
I'm not sure. I think both have the big justice issue. Of course, there are separate. They do give rise to separate ethical issues. On the other hand, the adding years to life has no point unless we also add life to years. Because one of the big problems in many societies now is the aging population, who are in a very frail condition, and the justice problems that causes. So I think that in the end, it would be wonderful if we could just add life to years and say, okay, at 85, then that's it, but then at least you will have had a wonderful, but that's not, that's unfortunately not the case in many societies. You want to?
So just a comment. So I would be one of these people, I would not take the pill. I'm not interested in the pill at all, actually. But why I find this interesting is there's a whole bunch of people here in this room today who have a very good chance of living to be 90 or 100. And I don't know if they're thinking about what that world is going to, so what gets to Judith's point. What right will those people, what right do I have as a potential 90-year-old? What are the obligations of the state to me? What are the collective to me? Who do I have, who has obligations to me if that's becoming more likely? And how does one, it's a huge political problem, and no one's really thinking about it.
I do think people are thinking about it, because obviously in many societies we already have these elderly, and my argument would be a very Dutch one and say, yes, of course we have obligations towards the 90-year-old and to take care of them, but it would be better also for the 19-year-olds if they could live independently and have a vital, good vital functions and could take care of themselves, because it's more agreeable to take care of yourself. But I do think that a society has these obligations.
Peter?
Thank you. I have two medical comments, although I'm not a medical doctor, but like many other people in this room, I've read a lot of things. First is that as far as I read in the literature, there is an obvious increase in average life expectancy, but there is no increase over the last 50 years in maximum life expectancy. So the studies suggest that the number of people living more than 100 years, approximately 110, there is no change. So there's a composition issue here. So we have more and more elderly people, but it's not true that people live longer, at least as is today. That's the first comment. So in a way, we don't have a new problem, but more people have the old problem. And of course, it's a statistically very significant change, but it's another new problem. The second comment is that it is very unlikely that the way of lengthening life would be through pills, what you swallow at the age of 65, 58, whatever, and then it will get 25 years. Actually, we know how it works, and you alluded to that if you want to live 100 years, you better start at age 0. Even better if you start minus 9 months. So, and then theoretically, we know what are, at least there's a state-of-art knowledge, what is the best way of guaranteeing long life from an unborn, from a period of unborn baby, from a 1-year-old, 2-year-old. And that's what we are doing actually in modern life. And this is why we have average life expectancy increasing, because modern societies do all these things. And we know the implication. These things are very costly, starting from immunization to healthy food, sport, and all other things. So I think the real issue is not the pill thing. You simplify the problem enormously. It's very unlikely that that will happen, but it is probable that if more and more people have the optimal life conditions from a medical point of view, then maybe there will be something as an increase in the maximum life. But even that is not certain. So at least as far as I know, there is no medical suggestion that this is doable.
Well, as far as I know, medical opinion is divided on that, truly seriously divided, because Aubrey the Bray, for example, argues that we can live a lot longer. I also think, but that is the data I think fed by Dutch experts here, is that there is an increase also in the maximum lifespan. That it's slowly, but that there still is also an increase in the maximum lifespan, average. With regard to the method, of course, a pill would be, is a simplification and is just a way to try to make you think of the arguments. What has intrigued me over the years is that if it's really available through this lifestyle, that it's not only because of societal factors that we don't do it, but also because we don't want to let go of our cakes, we don't want to not smoke, we don't want to not drink. I mean, it's very interesting that the price we have to pay apparently then is too high, and that we'd rather have a pill. I'm not sure about genetic, I mean, there is lots of theories on genetic modification that might increase lifespan, which is also an option that is sort of between the hypothetical pill and the lifestyle choices. It's possible. I mean, this is obviously very difficult, and somebody can come up with an invention next week that will change the whole perspective here. It depends, but the research in telomeres and in caloric restriction are very promising.
I think the other unknown is stem cell research.
I think a very important distinction which you have made is between chronological aging and biological aging. Because of course we don't want to stop chronological aging, but we want to stop biological aging. And what happens if this pill only partially prevents biological aging? I think most people would take a pill because life is such a promise for everybody, for most, biologically determined, that I think most would take a pill. But I'm not sure that this pill, if it not totally prevents biological aging, will be a real blessing. There can be a very tremendous amount of suffering, and I think in this case new rights will emerge. We mustn't forget that the whole euthanasia movement came into existence because modern medicine could prolong the life, but it sometimes could prolong only the dying process, and many people felt that they don't want that, and medicine was not willing to accept that. And then was born this right to death movement, which is quite strange because right to death, everybody dies, so I don't have a right to fall down. Gravitation will take care of that. So right to death seems absurd if you don't take into account that it was not easy to do that in a society which much technological aid. So I think if this will happen, then perhaps new rights will be created because society perhaps will pressure people to take a pill or pressure people not to take a pill. It depends, of course, on the situation and whether people must make this choice without any pressure, and when they do the choice, perhaps the consequences will be not very bright, and I think therefore that perhaps some new rights would be created.
I think that's some analogy, but Josko mentioned, for instance, artificial life prolonging treatment has resulted in numerous debates on euthanasia, when the life should be terminated based on the request of the individual. And using this analogy, and there are some societies where there is a whole new industry developing. I'm thinking in Japan, for instance, then there are robotics is helping for the elderly and lonely people, because they realize that there are some new needs and services which have not been served before, and they didn't think about before. So they going assistance in shopping, for instance, and taking the elderly, but not only the biological but also spiritual and mental needs of the elderly. So I think that's an interesting point which has been raised.
Yeah, imagine a robot taking care of your spiritual needs. That's quite. I'm not going to take the pill myself if that's happened. But your argument is very dependent on the success of the anti-aging. Because basically, if it would work like it's supposed to work, then you would not want the good death, or you would not need the robot. So I think these are more the problems that are born now with all the handicaps that aging now causes and the difficulties it causes. So if a method would work, then it would not be those kind of problems. There might be a duty to die then, rather than a right. I mean, there might indeed be societal pressure on people. Say, okay, now you've reached the age of 128. It's high time you leave this world. And then you might have a right that people would say, no, I still want to go on, and can I state my case, and I love life so much. But if the methods work properly, this would not hopefully be a problem.
Petra.
Thank you. This is Petra Barker from Legal Studies and C-Lab. I'm a researcher at C-Lab as well. And I was just trying to draw a parallel, or a parallel came to my mind when you were talking about the problems concerning adding years to life, and also the future rights that might accordingly emerge that have been addressed by many of the professors here. And what came to my mind was the period of the 1929, 1930 and the Scandinavian model, which is usually praised for its social policy. However, I would like to point out the criticism concerning the Scandinavian model at this point. What they had in mind was relieving those who are capable to work from the burdens of taking care for those who are in need, namely the children, the sick, the elderly, and so on. So a kind of a ghettoization of the elderly started. It is unthinkable for European, and especially for Central European mind, what happened in Sweden or Norwegian, that people who are 17, they just leave the family, and then there's a reunification of the family annually once. And institutions are taking care of these individuals. However, this is what happened. It has been praised. The idea was that those who are capable of working, they will accumulate a wealth and they will contribute to society and so on. And this was a total failure, which has only been acknowledged in the 1970s. And of course, it has immense consequences, not only for the era that we are talking about, but also for criminal. For example, the individual responsibility has been diminished because we were thinking in institutionalized terms. So I think we've been there, and the responsibility of the small communities, the smallest community being the family, but also the local communities have been kind of abolished, and it had to be reinvented in a way. So I'm afraid that should we add years to the life, and we are already there because this is already what's happening, and I'm not really sure. And the other scenario, adding quality to these coming years, seems to be more of a utopia. So this might have the dangers in a way to totally reconstruct societal responsibilities the way we currently know. And then the question is, yes, what rights will we have, but who is obliged to guarantee these rights? This is another question. Society as such, am I contributing through my taxes, or will I personally contribute to this responsibility?
The questions are getting even more difficult. I'm not sure whether the Swedes and the Norwegians would completely agree on you when you say that it's a complete failure. I mean, the other argue. No, but I mean, others might argue that in fact it has changed, it has liberated women, it has relieved people from the strangling effects of families. I mean, many people in Japan are not too happy of having their in-laws and having to take care of them for years and years and years if you can't afford a robot. So I mean, this is really, it's really very, very complicated as it is about what does it mean to be a member of a family, and how do we envisage families, and how long do you stay into a certain families, where I think that people can have very different views. With regard to your last question, my answer would be that both as an individual, as a person, as well as a social, as a member of civic society, you would have to participate, as well as a taxpayer. So there are duties on both. I could imagine also that you would, for example, really have time or a certain stage in your life where you take care of grandchildren. And if you're a fit elderly, why not? I mean, it might even be a very interesting experience, different from what it's now. I mean, we could imagine lives that are different, but still very family bound.
Thank you very much. I'll make the last question, and then we can continue the discussion during the reception. The last question.
Thank you very much. My name is Shandor. I'm a historian from Debrecen University, and I worked as an advisor at an old people's house 10 years ago. And thank you very much for this lecture, because it could help me that years, and my granny passed away this summer in her 104th year. So that's for experiences. And my question concerns the human dignity. As my experiences shows, the human dignity is a question of legal problems to some extent, but not only. And we are proud of our institutions in Western societies, and we are asked by, for instance, Muslim neighbors or friends that why you are proud of these institutions. And when I was asked by a doctor in an old people's house that why do you take care for your granny, because she's old. And that shows that the question of human dignity on one hand is the question of society, how it could be guaranteed, and the question how the elderly could be convinced that the human dignity is the same as all human dignity or the children's human dignity. And maybe the human dignity could change during their life. I don't believe it, but this is a question. Because if our society could have a very clear, correct sense of human dignity, no physician could ask that why do you worry for your granny as she's old. And such a physician are constantly working in a hospital with old people. So institutions, legal tools, ways, and pills are good things, but there is a philosophical or psychological question of the sense of dignity. Thank you.
I agree with you in the sense that obviously for the frail elderly to take good care of them is one demonstration of dignity, that of respect for their dignity that they definitely deserve. And you can measure the civilization of a society to a certain extent in the way it treats its frail elderly. On the other hand, that's not all there is to dignity. You may know that in the Netherlands there have now been last year, for example, 25 cases of people with early onset dementia who have asked for euthanasia and who have got it. And that is not because they would not have been taken care of had the disease progressed, but that was because their own view on dignity was such that they did not want to live with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So there is the other side of the person. How do you perceive what is dignified for you, and where are your limits? So you have to look at the individual perspective as well. The whole point of longevity and of adding life to years and years to life is that you would be more independent and healthy and would not be a frail person. But that might be dangerous, because then we might be inclined not to take care of frail persons. And of course I've now been talking about elderly, but there are mentally handicapped persons who are very frail and need care. Each of us can be hit by a bus and have brain damage and need care. I mean, there are other kinds of frailty that are in need of good care. So I completely agree with you there.
Thank you very much. I think it was a very nice closing of the discussion, because I think human dignity is extremely important in settling these questions, and especially the autonomy of the person. As you said, it's a key point in discussing this issue. Unfortunately, time to time in different societies, we see cases when externally they assess that the elderly don't have the same level of dignity, which is, of course, it would be a scandal in the human rights assessment. So thank you very much for raising this point. And I think that we're very privileged today that Inez was with us, and I think that we could see from the reactions that this is a very important topic. And I was very happy to see that in the university community is not particularly interested in the elderly age. So I was a little bit afraid of the topic, how the students would be interested in engaging such a talk, but it seems that it already concerns us, this topic, and I think it was a good indications of the reactions and the question. And let's continue this discussion in a more pleasant circumstances. And I would like to invite our guest for a small reception after the lecture. And thank you very much again for being here. Thank you very much for